We'll see you around the timeline. Feels good to be back.
I think that Rollup is one of the most premier media brands in crypto, and Andy and Robbie are great experts at everything they talk about, and it's my favorite podcast.
Adding it to my library as we speak.
Potentially multi-chain deployments.
We are at DevConnect Day 1 here. I'm Odysseus from Base. JP Morgan, BlackRock, DTCC, Fidelity, the entire thing was just institutions. It's next level. This industry is going to the next level. And guys, I don't know what else to say. I'm bullish.
He said it, he finally said it.
I'm so bullish.
Andy's bullish, I'm bullish, we're bullish. Is headed to the top. If we're not already at the top, we're going to the top.
We're going.
Rollup is my favorite.
From all walks of life, all over the world, all over this industry, come together for the Rollup.
Zoom out. The institutions aren't coming. They're simply here. It's the golden age of crypto, guys. Get right. Let's go.
you on the show.
Welcome back to the Tokenization Tower. You're watching the Rollup. We are here live in the Nest, broadcasting live from the financial capital of the world. Today's April 21st, and we are live. Guys, I am on Restream right now. I will see what you guys have to say in a second. We are live. Shout out to Plume, the Nest, bringing on-chain asset management infrastructure to the masses. I just put out a tweet today saying that they have scanned 40 million transactions in their sequencer, meaning that they are keeping track of who's using the chain. Today, last night, Arbitrum put out a post announcing that they have froze 30,000 ETH tokens of the 106,000 that were hacked. Today, we've got Odysseus of Phylax Systems, a local security expert down there in Brooklyn somewhere. And we got Rune, the founder of Sky, and Philip, the chief security officer of Coinbase. Guys, gonna be a show today, kind of following off yesterday's show. A little bit different today, though. Not so focused on what's happened over the last kind of 72, 96 hours, a bit more kind of broad. You know, we talked a lot yesterday about what happened this weekend, why it happened. Now we're going to get into, more of like what's to come. We have Sky, Rune on. He's going to talk to us a lot about what they're looking at. Sparkland has had a massive jump in terms of total deposits on their lending market. And then obviously Odysseus and Philip are going to talk more on the security side. So let's get into today's topics. I kind of just went over it all already. But today we do have our lovely friends here, Phylax, stabled up, brought to you by Frax with Sky's co-founder, as mentioned. Coinbase CSO also joins the show. We are live from the tower, markets and weather coming up next. First, let me tell you about Frax, our local in-house stablecoin partner, building the infrastructure for the future of digital money, open, stable, and borderless. Guys, visit frax.finance today. All right, guys, it is a cool 48 degrees here in New York City. Beautiful day outside, actually. I did wear the trench coat again. So, Robbie, if you're listening to this, I know you're still recovering from the wisdom teeth surgery. It is still officially trench coat weather, especially in the mornings. Crisp and clean, classic cool spring day out here in New York. The Knicks lost by 1 last night. Don't know how that happened. I was watching the game. They were up by 10, 11, 12 points. Came out very, very weak in the fourth quarter. I imagine just down here, I can actually see Penn Station was probably pretty hectic last night after the game. Let's get into the markets. Today's weather is powered by Relay.link. All right, guys. It's green. It's green. It looks good. It looks stronger than previous days. Today we had Kevin Warsh, the new Fed chair, come out and kind of say that kind of some, I guess you could say, hawkish things. I don't know. It wasn't too bad. But yeah, I mean, look, this is holding on. Hyperliquid struggling. We'll see kind of how that pans out. I think this whole security thing is getting everyone all riled up based on the on-chain kind of security preferences and what they're seeing out there. So wouldn't be surprised if some of these, DeFi names kind of struggle a bit. Aave struggling a bit, $10 billion lost in terms of TVL. Sky's not. Sky's doing well. Sky's up 1% today. But yeah, if you look at that bottom ticker, kind of a mix of red and green, mostly a bit of red today. The big names here almost seem like they're just staying where they've been. Chainlink, Near, etc. So that's the markets today, powered by Zama, our local in-house privacy solution, encrypted assets on-chain, on Ethereum, confidential transactions as well. Equity's getting a bit of a pullback here. Haven't been paying too much attention there since the kind of big breakout. And of course, the ups and downs of Trump are never going to end, it seems. So, all right, guys, let's get into the news. Before we do, let me tell you about Near, our in-house local AI partner, the blockchain designed for AI native applications and autonomous agents. Start developing at near.org, near.com, or near.ai. All right. So, Apple has named John Ternus as the new CEO, replacing Tim Cook, who will transition to executive chairman. 15 years for Tim Cook. Did an absolutely amazing job. The only pushback that I've been seeing on Twitter is the AI development on Apple's side as of late. That has not been competitive, apparently, compared to Gemini and Google. So Ternus is a 25-year veteran here. He will become the CEO as of September 1st, which is pretty big for them. And yeah, I expect a lot of focus on AR, VR, next-gen product developments, and just different new AI developments. So shout out to Apple, shout out to Tim Cook. What a run. Amazing run. Doubling down on hardware, probably going to double down on Apple Intelligence and Siri. I know all of us Apple users are probably wondering, when that's going to improve. I think that's probably going to be part of the focus. So, all right, guys, let's move on into what came out last night. Something that I think ruffled a lot of feathers in the community for good and for bad. So the Arbitrum Security Council came out and said that they are taking emergency action to freeze the 30,766 ETH being held in the address on Arbitrum 1. About $71 million. So this is really interesting that the hacker actually kept this on Arbitrum. And as soon as the hacker went and saw that Arbitrum froze it, they started immediately pushing the assets on mainnet ETH through Thorchain, Umbra, and a couple other solutions to get it over to Bitcoin. The arguments here are basically around whether or not this is decentralized or not. And obviously this isn't an immutable action in the sense that this isn't a blockchain that is meant to be similar to a Bitcoin or Ethereum. This is a stage 1 rollup. The Security Council is a feature in this regard. But this is the first time I've ever seen a layer 2 like this get so deeply involved. And so what happened was there was a 9 of 12 Security Council that chose to effectively freeze these funds. And this is a massive win for all the parties involved. Anybody who's worried about layer 0 or Aave getting a loan, this is a massive, massive win. This is undoubtedly the right thing to do in this situation. If you have the power to stop the DPRK and North Korean hackers and you don't exercise that power, I think that is wrong. This is definitely still like not DeFi. It's not decentralized. This is like multi-sig interaction from the Security Council, but that's fine. It's the state of a stage 1 L2. This is why a lot of these chains have opted to stay in stage 1 rather than moving to stage 2, because once you do get to stage 2, the ability to change things really goes out of the window. And look, man, I think Arbitrum did the right thing here. I think they undoubtedly did the right thing here. I'm curious what Odysseus has to say about it, what some of the other folks coming on today have to say about it. But I think they did the right thing here, and I think it's going to go down as extremely helpful to the entire process of getting the rest of the funds back. They only need to get 70,000 ETH back now, which means that Aave's loan amounts that they're going out and trying to source have came down. Layer 0 and Kelp's liability has came down. Obviously, the rest of the funds are gone. Unfortunately, those are being transferred over to Bitcoin. Those will not be frozen on mainnet Ethereum. They will not be frozen on Bitcoin. But I think in this regard, Arbitrum did the right thing. I tweeted that. The comments in that tweet were like a mix of supportive and not. Anyone who says otherwise is just playing devil's advocate. I don't agree. The only thing proven by this is that layer 2s are Trojan horse enforcement mechanisms that allow the tyrannical state influence. Stop a bad guy today, subjugate the innocent tomorrow. Okay, totally agree. The best Bitcoin advertisement from a shitcoin clown show. Okay, Best move, to be honest. Ethereum should hard fork to claw back the stolen funds. Don't know about that. So, I mean, look, there's a lot of people that agree with this being a net positive for the space and for Arbitrum, and then people that are also pushing back on it. I expect that that's, somewhat normal in these circumstances. So, yeah, I mean, guys, like Arbitrum had a tough choice here. They were forced to induce a new question, which is how much control is too much control in these decentralized systems? And they came out and answered what they think to be the correct answer. And so, look, man, I think, again, if you have the power to stop a bad actor doing an illegal activity on chain, it is your duty and responsibility to do so. And I think Arbitrum recognized that and they acted on that. And that's all I have to say about this. So big win for all of DeFi and for all the people who are trying to save these protocols and secure these funds. All right, let's move on into the next topic here. Getting off of this hack and off this news. Looks like Anthropic secures a massive compute deal with Amazon. They're looking to secure 5 gigawatts of compute for training and deploying Claude. I mean, this compute war is just absolutely accelerating. It will continue to accelerate. I mean, I expect Amazon added also a $5 billion investment in this deal with potential to up to $20 billion. So, yeah, there is a lot here in terms of the compute race happening. It will continue to happen, I expect. And, yeah, I mean, big congrats to Amazon. Congrats to Anthropic as well. All right, let's move on. I think this next topic is just, I mean, this is the most classic crypto thing. Bitcoin is a sovereign settlement asset for 20% of global oil. And today, maritime security firms are warning of scammers exploiting the chaos. So apparently, there was a group of people who scammed a ship settling their transactions in either Tether or Bitcoin, and then that ship proceeded to get fired at after they had already paid the amount to, or the toll to get through. So, I mean, come on. I mean, this is just, I mean, come on. Let's watch this video here.
Iran, we're talking about people can pay their toll fees on the Strait of Hormuz in Bitcoin.
Yeah, I mean, I
isn't that quite positive for Bitcoin?
I thought that for me was like massive news.
But just from a signaling standpoint,
just like I wrote in my newsletter this week, like it's like a real sort of shifting of the Overton window, right? It's that moment of, because again, it's kind of the reason they're looking at whether it ends up like being used or not. It's the reason they're choosing that as like kind of really the only neutral asset out there.
Not even gold, right?
Not even gold, because gold still for settlement needs a third party for custody. So you need to trust someone. But then also with gold, you haven't got like in terms of actually as a payment mechanism. Bitcoin settles within minutes. So it was. I think that's quite a big moment. And to think. To think that could be potentially facilitating 20% of the, Bitcoin is the currency potentially to facilitate 20% of the world's oil trade is huge. Now, again, whether who knows how that's going to play out.
I mean, I think a lot of this is going to probably end up settling in Bitcoin, perhaps. I think the news that I saw about this kind of like scamming thing happened was actually in Tether. So the Tether transaction was actually the one that was misrepresented and then sent to this wrong person, and then they got attacked. Look, I think it's great for Bitcoin if it's being used as a kind of this neutral asset. That was always kind of part of the appeal and of the pitch. Yet to be seen what this means more longer term, though. But yeah, interesting nonetheless. All right, let's move on here from the Strait of Hormuz and from our lovely Bitcoin bulls. Into, I believe we have some quantum computing news. Quantum computing won't break Starknet. Unlike most ecosystems, we've been building with that threat in mind since day one. Let's go ahead and watch this video. I think these guys are pretty, they're going pretty hard on the Starks being quantum resistant rather than Snarks angle.
Which then brings us to cryptography. One of the main classes of mazes that a quantum computer can break are things related to a branch of cryptography. And now we won't go into details, but in cryptography, there are two huge branches. There are branches and problems which a quantum computer can break. And these are things usually related to a discrete logarithm or factoring. And that's one kind of cryptography. And if we have tomorrow a large-scale quantum computer, all of that cryptography just goes to the garbage can. It cannot be used. Okay, and then there's this other branch of cryptography that usually involves things like hashes, like SHA-2, and also some kinds of encryption systems like AES. And that part is not affected by a quantum computer. So a quantum computer doesn't break all of cryptography, but it does break a very big branch of cryptography, including things like ECDSA, which is a piece of cryptography that's used to sign Bitcoin transactions. So now let's summarize what we said so far. If a quantum computer, which does not exist yet today, but if there was a large-scale computer, a quantum computer tomorrow, it could break a large class of cryptographic systems, including the signature scheme that is currently used to sign Bitcoin transactions, okay? And there's this other class of problems or cryptography that, by the way, includes things like ZK Starks, which is what Starkware has, invented and productized and uses to secure its network.
Yeah.
And a bunch of other things like SHA-2 and the proof of work used in Bitcoin. All of those things are not susceptible to quantum computers. So even if a large-scale quantum computer emerges tomorrow, those kinds of cryptographic primitives are safe. Things like ZK Starks, SHA-2, AES, they stay safe.
Yep. Yeah. So I think, again, when we had Mert on, he was talking about this transition from Snarks to Starks eventually, and how these Stark proofs rely on hash functions, not elliptic curve cryptography. Effectively, Starknet has been working on this problem for so long, and yeah, I mean, just makes sense for them. This is like a very, very strong marketing angle for them. Quantum resistant blockchains will rise in popularity as quantum fears increase. And now it's becoming a competitive differentiator for blockchains. The question is, can they actually export their technology to other blockchains and help them as well, specifically larger blockchains? That is an answer to a question that I would be really, really curious to see from Starknet's side, because I think that's something that the entire industry is going to want and need. And so, yeah. All right, guys, we're going to get into this exploit a bit deeper with Odysseus. He's coming up, the founder of Phylax Systems. He should be our kind of local in-house security representative today. Yeah, I mean, he's going to probably explain to us what happened over the last several, it's really been a series of 96 hours now or so. And so, yeah, we're going to learn about kind of how he thinks this happened, what he thinks happened, and more. So looking forward to this one. Let's bring him up and get this show started here with Odysseus, a friend, first time on the show. Alrighty, man. Welcome to the show. Good to see you, man.
Good to see you, man. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course, man. What a weekend, right? Or what a 96 hours.
Yeah, right? The past 2 weeks or 3 weeks has been insane. Started with a drift hack, Marcel, now this, right?
Yeah, man. What we saw, I was asleep when Arbitrum put out their announcement of freezing the funds. That's obviously a big contribution to the efforts here. I'd like to just start from like the highest level, man. Like I'm curious if you have any particular insights into really why you think this happened or how you think this happened from the security lens. Just kind of walk us through more of a high level, and then we can get into some of the nuance here.
Yeah, so it was a very sophisticated attack, right? They Banteg, which is a very famous developer in the community and security researcher, had a very nice analysis where basically the attackers were able to infiltrate inside the trust boundary, inside the systems of layer 0, and basically replace the RPC nodes that are used as a source of truth for messaging with malicious binaries, with a malicious version that were used to create these fake messages, right? It's a very sophisticated attack.
And layer 0 was basically saying that it was a RPC that was compromised, but you're pretty certain it was more of the internal system.
Yeah, exactly. They are running the RPCs, right? So it seems that they were able to infiltrate their systems and replace the RPC nodes they run, right? They don't. It appears, at least from the communication, they were not using an external RPC provider, but they were running their own RPC nodes.
Yeah, yeah. But the kind of question that people are asking, and that I'm also curious about, is if that one-of-one DVN was taken down, right, internally, why were the other, 40 to 50 DVNs not taken down?
That was the most EV, probably they calculated, right? And they say, okay, we have access to the system. What is the best attack we can carry out, right? What's the most money we can extract? And they calculated that, well, if we go through this route, through this risk-taking token, and then we can use Aave to, take the loan, right? They calculate that was the most profitable attack, because the more, tokens, or the more tokens they attacked, right? This would raise the probability that the alerting systems they have, they would see something. But it's interesting that I think if they really wanted, they could spoof probably tens of OFTs, right? And create havoc, like 2008 havoc in DeFi.
And they didn't.
Yeah, because they don't care about, they prefer to not kill the cow, but just extract as much milk for as long as possible. Yeah.
So are we certain this is DPRK, you think?
I mean, it's too early, but the level of sophistication tracks with a state actor. It was a very sophisticated attack, because not only they replaced the RPCs, but they also dosed the honest RPCs to make sure that these were not able to offer honest answers. And also they manipulated the observability stack, and they removed logs afterwards, such that it takes more time to identify the root cause. Very sophisticated attack. They had root level access probably.
Yeah. So at Phylax, you guys do a lot of work on kind of preventing exploits before they happen, or helping after. I guess like this is a silly question perhaps, but like, how preventable was this from, in hindsight, how preventable was something like this?
So, an obvious first way to prevent this is to have multiple sources checking for these breach messages, right? Because all the breach hacks that have happened, effectively, there is a very basic rule that breaks, right? You have a withdrawal on the one side without the deposit on the other side, right? So if you have an external system that uses completely different stack and completely different technology to track this very basic accounting, then this could have been prevented. And all breach attacks, actually. The second thing, this is where circuit breakers become very interesting, is that you can limit the spread of the contagion, right? Because now we're having a bank run on Aave.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I had Rob from Dragonfly on and asked him about rate limits yesterday. I think you saw one of the clips there, and he basically said that in traditional systems, they've been using these for, forever as a way to help retail, as a way to prevent, massive large scale liquidations, exploits, etc. And so is part of your vision for where DeFi is headed, is it more akin to traditional systems? Like what would rate limits actually look like in these systems?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because in traditional finance, we use this rate limiting for financial types of events, right? A stock drops 5% in 5 minutes, you pause the market and then you reactivate it. You don't really have securities issues because you have long settlement, right? Worst case scenario is it's expensive, but you have a couple of meetings, you go back and you modify the ledger. In crypto, a hack is a physics event, right? It happened. And why these are institutions are coming on chain is because they have instant settlement, because it's more capital efficient. But this efficiency is also what's causing so much pain now, and why security needs to be top of mind is because you have instant settlement. You can't drop into a meeting and fix it. So I think, circuit breaker is going to be a vital piece of the security infrastructure, such that you basically say, if there is an abnormal outflow or inflow of funds, stop it and then ask questions later. Or maybe you allow certain parties to do that, like maybe market makers who are trusted to perform a lot of movement. But if an unknown address does it, then you don't allow them.
And is that something that you guys are working on the Phylax side, is kind of implementing these types of rate limits and circuit breakers into DeFi? Like, is that at a smart contract level? Is it at the account level, protocol level? How would that actually look?
Yeah, so with the EVM, you have a very constrained environment naturally, so there's not a lot of things you can do. So our approach is basically doing that at the network level. So implementing technology that runs at the network level, either the sequencer or the block builder, and surfaces this extra functionality to protocols like Aave to leverage to protect themselves.
And so at the network level, you're able to actually have, like, for example, there's some products that do like KYC and AML scanning at the sequencer level for L2s.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's something that I've heard about and seen. It, like, Agora has, I think, $10 million rate limit on some of their stablecoin side of things. They came out and said that Guy from Athena came out and said that they've got these kind of preemptive measures already. It kind of just seems like a failure on the part of the teams involved to have this not already implemented.
Yeah, it gets complicated because on the token level, if you just have a token, maybe you can do a very basic circuit breaker. But when you have a complicated protocol, like a lending protocol or a DEX, you need extra functionality to make the circuit breaker not trick all the time. Because it's natural in these environments to have, you need something smarter, right? You need to have more logic that decides when to circuit break or not. And this is where we come in.
Okay, and so this is like, if X, like, it's a very conditional kind of operation. Like, okay, so like, if this capital amount is deposited, or if this amount is withdrawn, or if this event happens, it's like a very if-then conditional logic basically for these rate limits.
Exactly, but custom to every protocol, right?
Yeah.
So we make it easy for the protocol to express conditions that are not possible on the EVM. And that's how you end up in a system, and I think that's important, that's credibly neutral. It's aligned with the Clarity Act. Because if you have KYC and AML, then it's not really decentralized, and then probably you will be regulated as you should.
Well, that's what Arbitrum found themselves in when they made this announcement was, okay, look, the argument is if you have the power to stop this and you don't, then you're, effectively complicit. And if you do stop it, then you raise the immediate question of like, all right, well, this was never a decentralized system anyways. And then people are like, well, it's a stage 1 rollup. It's supposed to be able to do these things. That's the whole point of being a stage 1 rollup. So there's kind of two sides to this. Where do you think the proper answer is here? Is Arbitrum freezing the funds a sufficient enough kind of way for them to step in and stop what's happened on their chain without kind of losing users' trust? Did users even care anyways? Like, what's your reaction to Arbitrum freezing these funds?
It's a very complicated question. I think if you can do it, you should do it. But at the same time, this is going to circle back, right? Because with the Clarity Act specifically, there were a number of rollups, and they were making the point that, you know, we are mature blockchain systems, we are digital commodities, we are decentralized, because we have the forced inclusion, forced exit. When they try to make this argument again in the future, the incident today will be used to tell them you're actually not as decentralized as you're saying.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't really think they had a choice.
No, when you have so much, you have everyday's people money at stake, you know, it's not ethical to say, you know, this is life, right? But ideally we create systems. And I think, you know, there was a similar discussion about Circle with Drift, right? I think you can make an argument that Circle should freeze funds only if the space has done everything they could on security, and we're just talking about extremely edge cases that are impossible to prevent. But the reality is we're not. So I think it's too early to, you know, perform this type of surgeries with a butcher knife as a preventative measure. I think we should first, you know, invest more in security tooling like circuit breakers, create more preventative measures, and then have that as a result of, because you can't have Circle policing the DeFi space, right? That's the security model.
Yeah. I mean, they got a lot of pushback for not stepping in there on Drift.
Yeah, and I think personally, that's my personal opinion, I'm going to get a lot of hate mail for this, but I think they made the right choice, because once they stop saying, well, court orders, then further down the line, and maybe not that much further, law enforcement agencies can ask them for other types of freezing, right?
Right.
At least with Arbitrum, you have a credible, decentralized, you know, security council, multiple parties involved, and also it's a very complicated technically thing to do, right? So asking them to do it, they have arguments in favor of saying, well, guys, we just performed open heart surgery. We can't just do it whenever.
Yeah, I just pulled up Steven's tweet, the co-founder of Off-Chain Labs, and he says, the sequencer has absolutely no power to move funds and was not the one who acted here. It was made entirely by the Arbitrum Security Council, a group of 12 individuals elected by the DAO, which requires a 9 of 12 vote for them to agree. And for many, the ultimate goal is to get rid of the Security Council entirely, but this is complicated.
Yeah, it is very complicated.
Yeah. I mean, they must have been in the war room talking about the political, legal, regulatory, financial, like the combination of all those factors. They all kind of step on each other's toes in different ways. And like the most obvious. Yeah.
There's no good decision, right? There was no good option. There was only bad options, and just identifying the least bad one.
Yeah. So where do we go from here for the rest of these funds? I think Aave's trying to work on getting some loans. I think obviously Kelp, DAO, and Layer Zero are kind of pushing back on each other in the public landscape. Kind of like how do you anticipate this resolves? Users are still frozen on Aave across multiple chains. There's a couple L2s specifically that are going to be on the hook. Mantle put out a statement this morning. How do you anticipate this kind of resolves? And you know, I'm curious if you have any thoughts on how long you may think Aave's markets will be frozen.
I'm guessing that everybody's trying to find a lender of, you know, last resort to give them the money to recoup some of the funds. You know, Aave is having a bank run and everything is frozen, and it just shows how much of a systemic risk we have. right? Because in Aave, even if you were the most safe deposit, the most safe position, you're frozen in them, right? I expect it to be weeks, especially seeing how both teams are pointing fingers at one another. You definitely have lawyers involved, so all the communications we're seeing are airtight from a legal perspective. I think it's going to be ugly.
Yeah. Yeah. So just from the Phylax perspective about some of the work that you guys have done, I know that you guys have done some exploit prevention on Linea and some other chains. Maybe you could just explain some of these stories, kind of like how you guys stepped in and what that process actually looks like for other chains, other protocols. And yeah, just would love to hear some of those anecdotes.
Yeah, so we are integrated with Linea. This was the first network, a great team. They're taking security very seriously. And basically there we had, it was an immutable contract where because of a misconfiguration of a front end, users were allowing an immutable contract with their funds, which means a drainer started taking notice of that. And then the drainer would just call the immutable contract and just take the money from the users, right? So we work with 0x and we added an assertion and invariant on that contract, even though it wasn't 0x vulnerability, right? They went above and beyond to protect user funds, even from an external integration. And now whenever a transaction from the drainer tries to hit the network to drain a user, it stopped, right? The software just sees the transaction, runs the policy, sees the policy is implicated, and then it doesn't allow it, right? And 0x was the only party that could add this policy. So the system is very decentralized, right? Only the protocol itself can add policies to itself. And we stopped hundreds of transactions. The drainer is really not taking the signal.
Yeah. And so they keep trying to put these like malicious transactions through, and then you guys are able just to block them at the
sequencer level, yes.
At the sequencer level.
It's not even us. We just provide the software. The software runs within the trust boundary of the Linea sequencer, and we just coordinated with 0x to add the right policy. It's completely out of our control. Even if we wanted, we wouldn't be able to stop anything.
Yeah. Wow. So you think it's going to be weeks of the frozen funds?
I mean, unless someone jumps in, maybe we see Tether doing another leveraged buyout. Yeah, like it seems the parties don't want to work it out, right? They just shifting blame. There is, because there is a lot of legal liability, right? Like even if after a hack, the people I don't think know that even after you have a hack, and even if you survive it as a protocol, as a team, you are bound for life. The moment the protocol succeeds again, even if they manage to succeed, you can be sued. Right? That's what they're fighting for. It's not just covering the money, but it's all the possible future litigation they will receive the moment they get any kind of revenue.
Yeah. What I mean, I think the loan part from Aave is going to be based on paying that loan back on future revenue, kind of what happened to Bybit.
Yes.
I think it was less so on like you raised a good point. It's more on the legal side. I was just thinking purely financial. It's a loan that's going to be paid back over time, based on Aave's revenues, basically.
Yeah, but Aave is probably off the hook from a litigation point of perspective, right? Because they're just running the market. The real question is who will take the blame, either Keppel or Layer Zero. And then when they do that, all the future litigation they can receive, right? Maybe they succeed, they're doing great, and in 2 years they're hit with a group lawsuit.
Yeah.
Right. That's why you see, for example, whenever there is a hack, if they can't recoup the money, usually the legal vehicle, the development company, is disbanded.
Yeah. And that's probably more something that Kelp and Layer Zero are actively thinking about then. And that's why you see that the way that their comms are structured.
Yeah, because you have it for life.
Yeah.
Like, even if you succeed, you find the money, you make people whole, you're open for litigation for life.
Yeah. Wow, man. Well, Odysseus, man, I'm sure you're busy. I know that there's a lot of security conversations going on between different people who believe different things. So thank you for joining us. Quite a sombering 96 hours here in DeFi. We'll continue to monitor this as basically this evolves. I mean, we're seeing now each day different parties come out. I anticipate that a lot of like the major announcements and major moves have been made. Now we're really just waiting for how the socialization of these losses are going to come out.
And we still don't know how Layer Zero has not yet shared how the attackers got access to their systems.
Internally.
That's a very important piece of information we don't know yet.
Yeah. Well, to be continued. Odysseus, thanks for joining, man.
Thank you so much for having me.
Best of luck. Alrighty, man. Wow, guys. I mean, goodness. DeFi is in a very, very interesting place as we kind of navigate this situation. I mean, it has been a very, very, very hectic last couple of days. For those who are sitting in Aave waiting for their funds, I mean, it is very, very tough. It is a very, very tough situation to be in. Ladies and gentlemen, we've got Rune Christensen, the co-founder of Sky. He's going to join us to talk USDS, Sky, more. We're going to take a super quick break, get Rune in, and we'll be right back. Guys, this should be a good one. We're going to talk about what's going on with Spark, what's going on with Sky, his take on DeFi, and more. We'll be right back, guys.
Money, power, I'm money, power, I'm we get deep, you know we get deep, you know we get deep, we get deep, you know we get deep, we get deep, we get deep, we get deep, you know we get deep. We get deep, you know we get deep. We get deep. We get deep.
Welcome back to another episode of Stabled Up, our premier weekly show covering the ins and outs of digital dollars, stablecoins, and the future of decentralized finance.
The show is made possible by Phylax, and Phylax is powering the financial engine of the internet, powering FRX USD and Genius compliant stablecoins. This is the stablecoin super cycle made possible by Phylax. Now enjoy Stabled Up, our weekly stablecoin show.
Alrighty, guys, welcome to Stabled Up, episode number 28, our premier weekly stablecoin-oriented show powered by our friends at Phylax and their FRX USD product. We've got Rune Christensen here, co-founder of Sky. Rune, what a 96 hours in DeFi, man.
Yeah, it's another day in DeFi, I guess.
Yeah, indeed, indeed. Where do we start here? Well, Rune, I mean, I would just love to just get a bit of your perspective. We'll start on kind of this exploit, what happened, transition this convo into just kind of more broadly stablecoins, USDS, Sky. Starting on this exploit here, I mean, initial reactions, thoughts. So much has happened from Arbitrum earlier today with KelpDAO's statement, Layer Zero's statement, Aave's statement, kind of finding out what actually happened. Rune, I mean, from your perspective, what went wrong, what happened here, and just any immediate reflections and lessons here?
Yeah, I mean, I think first of all, it's pretty, it feels pretty shocking, right, that it happened so close to the drift incident, which was, I don't know, feels like that was like 2 weeks ago or something, almost. You know, that was very recent as well. And I mean, my understanding was that this was a pretty deep attack into the you know, the off-chain infrastructure of Layer Zero, combined with basically suboptimal configurations on the smart contract side for both Kelp and then Aave, which led a lot of these assets basically then get sort of cashed out. But ultimately, like I mean, it was just it's still like it's still quite surprising to actually see this kind of attack where North Korea like literally got onto like sort of very deep into the systems of to my understanding, like quite security focused organization like Layer Zero. And I mean, a lot of the sort of fear that I'm sort of that I've been sensing recently is this like fear around AI powered hacking basically and attacks on DeFi, and I think I remember from one of the statements that there literally was this mention of like that there were this could have been somehow AI accelerated, which of course I mean it's you can't really tell, I guess, necessarily, and on the other hand, every exploit always happens because there's some kind of mistake made. Like you can't have AI systems can't just like literally like hack something that is like built fully correctly just through magic. So it's not like everybody should be really scared and like expect anything to blow up any moment. But definitely, like, I think across the whole industry, I mean, already following the drift hack to some extent, everyone is just realizing like North Korea is watching. They are running 100 agents scanning your protocol right now, 24/7. They're looking for every single possible vulnerability, and everybody must just be prioritizing security even greater than they were before, right? That should have been priority number one already, but now it needs to be sort of an even bigger part of what you're doing. Is just basically everybody should be just keeping all of the money safe, looking for every single attack vector and basically fix it before the agents find it.
And I think, Rune, one of the other kind of preemptive points that you made was around this idea of the political post-exploit dynamic between protocols and voices in the space, kind of almost operating without without a plan, without a kind of emergency plan. And, you kind of wrote about how you think this is something that Sky should really work on and think about, and anybody should think about. I'm curious kind of what you think about how a protocol is or a community here, right, of the shareholders, of the token holders, of the participants of any given ecosystem should think preemptively about designing a potential post exploit command system, or a line of fire as far as like XYZ is to happen. How do you think about this? What is your kind of ideal end outcome for a company like Sky or others who maybe face with something like this in the future, or perhaps not? But of course, always being careful is better than not being.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have been mentioning this, right? That in many ways, the damage done to the DeFi industry from the uncertainty around this might actually have been greater than the loss of the hack itself. Just because you've had like several days of this like completely unprecedented sort of liquidity seizing up, and it's as if it's like the great financial crisis and the mortgage-backed securities just turn out to be worthless and so on. But the reality is, this is actually, sadly for DeFi, this is not it's a big hack, sure, but it's not like it's a similarly sized hack happened like a couple of weeks ago, right? So the real problem here is actually just that there's a lot of it brought a lot of systems into sort of states they were not prepared to be in, where suddenly there's this like uncertainty around what is this, like sort of Schrodinger's collateral, like you don't really know if it's worth anything, and then you can't run liquidations, and you don't know if is there going to be a bailout or not, and all of these things, like all of the uncertainty just results in everybody sort of being more conservative and basically not taking action. And that can just be incredibly bad for interconnected financial systems because they're all about liquidity. Once you remove the liquidity, it's just like it becomes very, very damaging and harmful. And you have like users like loopers that can be sort of really, that sort of depend on the ability to jump in and out of positions, and just like a lot of damage being caused by the uncertainty rather than the incident itself, right? It's like the classic, like, we have to fear itself, right? That actually this is itself a very harmful thing. But I think that's great news. Like, I think the fact that the Arbitrum assets were frozen, and there's some indication that like even Mantle, which is a completely, external project, is like stepping up to actually help and try to backstop this. I think that's gonna like, these kinds of movements is something that, at least if I was like an affected DeFi user, I would feel, that would be something that would sort of be comforting, in the sense that I would expect that this type of stuff is what's going to lead up to some kind of resolution happening, because the momentum and like the goodwill shown is going to make it a lot easier for everybody to come to the table and figure out how to basically resolve this, instead of what I think there was some fear of in the early days, which was some kind of like total PvP lawsuits everywhere. Everything is frozen for months, right? Which would just be so bad for everybody. So I'm very happy to see that there's this that there's this like likely collaborative solution, and hopefully things can get sort of fixed and recovered before it gets completely out of hand with the damage from the liquidity issues and the fear.
Yeah. The staked USDS APR or APY to supply on Sky hit upwards of 25% in the past 24-ish hours due to large people withdrawing. Is this a general broad risk off sentiment thing? Maybe you could just explain the dynamic behind this kind of yield ratio and how the Sky asset is involved here, because I think there's generally just this kind of risk off sentiment happening as you're explaining here, the fear being more problematic than the actual event itself. Clearly this is a very high yield opportunity for USDS holders. What's happening here?
Well, okay, so maybe I should just first explain STUSDS and sort of the broader landscape of Sky products. And so Sky, of course, it's primarily known as a decentralized stablecoin protocol, right? With USDS, that's the largest yield generating stablecoin, the third largest stablecoin in the world. But actually, Sky has like a lot of financial primitives, a lot of building blocks for different financial use cases, and famously the Sky agents that are just enabling really a lot of stuff to happen within Sky, even though it's like one ecosystem. It has the ability to sort of do a lot of different things all at once. And then one of the things that also really enables basically the ability for Sky to basically be very flexible and very complex in the types of things that are possible is risk tranching. So basically, you have sort of multiple different types of financial products that sit at different layers of what's called a capital stack. So basically, like if you want to take, like basically, I mean, I guess what people are used to in crypto and DeFi is usually like, well, here's the safe project, so I can put my money there and it's like low yield and low risk. And here's the super risky project, and then if I put my money there, it's like high yield and high risk. Well, the Sky, there's actually like, you can hold SUSDS that is like, absolutely optimized for risk-adjusted return, right? It's like definitely the most proven, best Lindy, like stablecoin product with a really, really reasonable rate of return, right? Right now it's at 3.75%, which is actually 10 points above SOFR, which is, a lot of people dunking on DeFi for not being able to beat TradFi, but USDS does in fact still beat TradFi and is very much highly risk optimized, right? But with Sky, you can also use a product like STUSDS, which is a sort of it's a higher risk token that is still that still has this link to the US dollar. And you can actually go even more, high risk and buy something like SPK, right? Which is then, a completely volatile governance token of one of the Sky agents. But so SUSDS, because it's a risk token and it's explicitly like marketed as risk capital, it's like, it's for advanced users, right? Because it has higher risk. It's not just a stable coin that is designed to protect you above everything else. With STUSDS, it's also about being able to offer a higher rate of return. And one of the consequences of this is that it can have its liquidity, it's one-to-one liquidity with USDS frozen when there's a lot of withdrawals. And that did happen for about, I think for 24 hours, maybe a little bit longer, right as the big crisis and the initial shock occurred. Sorry. But actually, the liquidity returned actually quite rapidly.
Yeah.
So, and then this is also a very good sort of story about, and I think this should be very encouraging to everybody in DeFi, that because Sky is sort of the protocol that has been really optimized for security, right? We've always been focused on security, always focused on risk management. This has always been our messaging, right? It's always been how we sort of built and conducted ourselves in the ecosystem, and as the products were marketed from the Sky Frontier Foundation, from all the Sky agents as they market their individual products, right? And that really paid off in this crisis because you got a sort of like partially like a flight to quality, right? So STUSDS is something like, I mean, it wasn't affected by this at all, but people just risk off, they're scared. And then they're like, at first they pull out the money, but quite rapidly, they basically put it back in because, they gotta have them assets somewhere. And if they're not ready to completely leave the on-chain world, then what Sky has to offer is sort of at this point very, right, it has a lot of Lindy effect. It's quite trusted.
Yeah, no, I mean, for sure. And I think, we've seen a kind of transition of capital or a shifting of capital into one of the stars as well, being Spark, I think has got a ton of deposits. And you also mentioned, and you got some pushback for this post about Spark's SPUSDT being one of the few USDT yield products that actually stayed fully liquid during the market stress. Maybe you could just explain why that happened and what the dynamics of that SPUSDT stablecoin yield product in Spark is and why wasn't it affected?
Yeah, so similar to what we just talked about with STUSDS, which is like one of these, like it's a DeFi yield product. Basically there's the two bread and butter primary types of DeFi products that exist are USDC vaults and USDT vaults, right? So basically where you can put your USDT, you put your USDC and get a return on that. And typically USDT products tend to have an easier time, like they tend to more easily run into liquidity issues. Why exactly that's the case, I'm actually not 100% sure. One of the reasons might be because of the Sky PSM, because Sky has like gigantic amounts of USDC liquidity, and this might generally help kind of deal with users moving in and out of getting a yield on the USDC specifically. But because there's no USDT PSM in Sky, although actually there is an ongoing effort to increase USDT liquidity actually in Sky, but currently there's not nearly as much USDT liquidity in Sky as there is in USDC. And I think this might be one of the contributing factors to USDT generally in crisis events like this. It's often much more easy for the USDT pools to dry up and the USDT to get stuck. And this like happened across the board. I think in all of DeFi, actually, you know, there might actually have been, you know, I can't actually be 100%. I didn't literally verify this myself, right? But from all the major pools I looked at, the only one I saw that never seized up even once was the SB USDT Spark pool. And I actually heard from some of the contributors that Spark was like actively managing this and actually losing money just trying to maintain that liquidity in this, like sort of throughout the event, right? As there was like a sort of a run on the bank across the whole ecosystem. And in my opinion, that was like a really clever move. So even though it cost them some money to subsidize this, I think it will have really bought them a lot of goodwill. And that's because I think so somebody like me, I'm in DeFi 24/7, right? So I all the time DeFi finance, you know, asset liability management. Like it's not a surprise to me that your USDT can get stuck in a DeFi pool. That sort of seems like this is some of the most basic stuff. That's like, yeah, that's one of the risks you accept, right? But for a lot of normal people who try this kind of stuff, I mean, if it's crypto, it's already scary, right? It's already hard to understand. And then your money is suddenly stuck and you can't get it out. That's really gonna like affect you emotionally. And I think, you know, like the price of not giving your users that shock where they maybe have a day where they think maybe they will lose their savings or something. Like the value of that is really priceless in an emerging market like DeFi and crypto, right? Where it's all about like establishing that brand and that sort of market presence. And I think the fact that the Spark guys, they actually made this decision and they sort of really doubled down on investing during this crisis in order to build their brand and build trust with their users for the long term. I think that must have really paid off. And I also want to highlight how it's quite, you know, unique and sort of it's like very unique to Sky specifically, right? That as a Sky agent, right? They're like a sub component of Sky basically, right? They exist inside this sort of broader Sky ecosystem running on Sky protocol rails and everything, but they still had enough flexibility to build a system that let them do this. Like I wasn't even aware that they could even do this. So I was like surprised, like how do you even pull it off? And they were like, oh, this is, you know, we'd use these primitives and then this way we were able to do it, right? And I think that's really cool, right? That you can have this, you know, the overarching like standardized risk management, security and processes of Sky, and then they were able to basically put it together into some very useful features that really paid off in this moment of crisis.
Yeah, and I think it kind of goes to explain some of the risk management choices holistically within, you know, the Sky ecosystem, and obviously been prioritizing ETH, staked ETH, a lot of RWAs to back USDS, and just kind of very, you know, more like what people would call pristine collateral over more exotic collateral. You know, I'm curious how your general view of collateral backing has changed as a result of this RS ETH kind of exploit here. Obviously, you know, we've even seen Athena come out as of late and say that they're sole basis trade backing for USDE is not what their future is going to look like. They're looking at other RWA collateral, the basis trade on commodities, etc. I'm just curious, following this event, has your view on DeFi native versus kind of more RWA or TradFi, if you will, collateral, has that view shifted, changed? Is it staying the same? Kind of generally, how is your viewpoint on the way DeFi should be thinking about collateral and the types of collateral, changed, or has it been just further reinforced?
Yeah, so Sky is, at this point, it's more than 11 years old, right? It's the oldest DeFi protocol. It has maintained stablecoin products without ever suffering any kind of loss or major instability for almost 9 years. And so end-to-end, the protocol has had no security incidents of any kind for more than 6 years. And this is all because the whole time, what Sky has fundamentally always obsessed over is security, risk management, what's going to happen to the collateral, right? I mean, that's what has kept me up every single night for the last 10 years, right? It's just thinking about what if something happens to the collateral, right? And so the kind of things that have been happening in DeFi lately, despite it being very shocking, and even to me, it definitely makes me feel uncomfortable to see sort of big hits being taken sort of left and right like this. Like, none of the types of things that are being exploited and the kind of things that are going wrong right now is not actually at all the kind of stuff that I'm scared of, in the sense that it's all preventable. Like, this recent RS-ETH situation, doesn't at all teach us anything new in Sky, because it's been very clear to us for many, many years, right? That you shouldn't, you shouldn't do that kind of stuff, right? You need to have a lot more clarity about the security setups of these types of assets, and even just generally the degree to which you can, use these like highly complex assets like restaking and so on. It's not really something that is allowed very much or at all in Sky, because it's just not like it, and it really comes down to like the risk adjusted return. It's just not worth the trade-off on the risk to use these kind of assets generally. But in order to understand that, you need to have very advanced like risk management frameworks and capabilities and monitoring systems and so on. And I think about 6 months ago, actually in Sky, we managed to kind of really increase our risk management capabilities and risk assessment capabilities. And we actually from that realized that even though we had been obsessing about risk for so long and we had been building everything to be as low risk as possible, there was still like, we actually realized we were definitely overweight on the level of risk the protocol was carrying. So actually for about the last 6 months, like Sky has been consistently in this like deleveraging, risk off, just like simplifying the exposures, reducing just reducing sort of the bulk of like concentration into some of the more, I would say some of the more sort of interesting assets, right? That originally was the kind of stuff that, it still is the kind of stuff that makes Sky really unique. Like it, for instance, it's backed by CLO ETFs, which are quite interesting assets. But about 6 months ago, it was determined that it had gone a little bit too far, and that was the kind of stuff that then had the exposure quite decreased. And yeah, like the crazy technical stuff, like restaking and bridges and that kind of stuff. That's something Sky has had a very low tolerance to that for quite a long time already. I think honestly, in the end, the really big takeaway for me from this, actually to the earlier point about like understanding the fallout of everything in advance, is really like there's always got to be like a clear protocol, like a clear rule set for what happens if a bridge gets compromised. Like that's got to be, and I think by default, I think the simple answer probably should be, you got to make it really clear to the users that choose to use a bridge that they are taking on additional risk that applies to them only. And on the contrary, like the mainnet users, Ethereum mainnet users that are consciously, right, they're choosing Ethereum mainnet because they want to be safe. They need that reassurance that you're not going to get contagion from other users that choose to use a bridge, right? And but I mean, this is, of course, this is kind of one of the major things that are being really examined in Sky now as a consequence of everything that happened.
So you guys just pushed a native deployment of USDS and SUSDS onto Avalanche using this kind of Skylink technology. It's already live on Solana. So you guys are obviously pushing a multi-chain strategy forward as well. How do you avoid the kind of native issuance problem when it comes to Ethereum being kind of the home, and you've got these other chains, but there are other security practices, models, validator sets, sequencers? How do you ensure that the representations of USDS and SUSDS across the broader multi-chain or cross-chain ecosystem also remain resilient? What does that look like for the users on other chains of Sky's assets?
I mean, so definitely something that that has been like a core tenet of like the Sky's approach to multi-chain for quite a while is that it must be built, I guess you could say, in-house. Yeah. Like there used to be a time where, you'd have other projects do bridges, and you'd have these like, I mean, you have the example of a USDC, right? Where sometimes you go on like multi-chain blockchains, and they will have like multiple different versions of USDC because you have kind of like different bridges doing different versions. And that's something that I believe, I mean, I think later, I found out, or I believe it's like, it can be quite risky, right? You really don't want your product and sort of users that like, I mean, let's say users that want to use USDS, and then somebody conveniently bridges USDS somewhere, and then it's available, and then you get this organic adoption. That sounds good in theory, but in practice, that can actually be a huge mess and very dangerous, because once you have that adoption going, it can be difficult to actually then transition it. And if you can't easily upgrade the bridge, it could be a huge problem if the bridge turns out to not be very secure. Yeah. So actually Skylink was this innovation that was basically designed to ensure that you only do USDS bridges and you only do multi-chain USDS when it's built following the Skylink standard, which ensures that it can be upgraded by Sky governance. And there's not going to be like external multi-sigs or external parties that are involved in potentially the management of this, or the decision about how should it be upgraded, or what to do in how to set the safety limits and so on, right? That should all be something set by Sky core governance. And yeah, I mean, that part of the strategy, I think, was totally correct. I think now, again, what probably needs to be re-examined by Sky and everyone else is like just how strict should these limits be, and they should possibly be stricter than people were expecting up until this point, right? Because you really want to avoid, again, this kind of situation where a loss occurs and it's big enough, like an event happens and the security incident is big enough that it creates this concern and fear of contagion, and things start to seize up, and that's just a very bad thing. You really gotta avoid that at all costs. Yeah,
100%. We're kind of getting into a more of a forward-looking environment here in conversation. Interestingly enough, the new Fed chair, Warsh, came out today and had a bit of a speech about his policies and his views. And ultimately, I think it's decently certain that we're going to get at least 1, 2, if not 3 rate cuts this year, probably just 25 bips. A lot of the stablecoin products and use cases for yield are directly derived from treasury bills and T-bills from, short dated assets in, these very, very safe, very liquid opportunities on chain. And so, as you mentioned earlier in an earlier point, there's this rhetoric right now that DeFi is less yield than the risk-free rate with a lot more risk. And I've kind of got this like inverse thesis here, where as the macro Fed rates decline, more speculative activity picks up on chain, driving the demand to borrow stablecoins, driving the yield to lenders up. And the opposite happens in environments kind of like now with, somewhat elevated rates and lower rates on chain. Now, obviously, you guys have a special kind of situation here, but that is what begs the question. In a lower rate environment coming up, even if it's just 50 bips, 75 bips by the end of the year, you can kind of see that the administration is pushing this forward, that the Fed wants this. Obviously, Trump is, screaming about it. I'm just curious, like, how much of your strategy changed from a collateral perspective, from a yield perspective, from an expansion perspective, when you have a lower rate environment versus a higher rate environment? What you expect from users, what kind of anticipatory measures you may be taking as a protocol, or maybe none at all, and it doesn't really matter. Just curious how you think about the broader macro Fed interest rates as it pertains to the value prop of something like SUSDS on chain.
Yeah, Sky has been engineered carefully to be able to handle whatever macro environment it finds itself in. And I think actually, to some extent, as rates go lower, increasingly credit spreads get more important. So basically, it's no longer enough to just be able to sort of like deliver the yield. It's like you gotta be able to handle more complexity, and then source the yield from basically through different avenues. And this is through this you can basically offer like you can capture credit spreads, right? But the thing is, even when rates are high, you still want to capture credit spreads and offer the best possible risk-adjusted return, right? And I think I think this idea of DeFi gives you like lower rates and way higher risk, that applies whether rates generally are low or they're high. Like, it's just as annoying to take tons of risk and then get 4% when the risk-free rate is 5% as it is to do the same thing and then take tons of risk and get 2% when the risk-free rate is 3%, right? In either case, you're underperforming and taking extra risk. And I would say the opportunity for DeFi is to, on one hand, really, really, really deal with the risk, first of all. And I think in Sky's case, the ecosystem has really done almost everything it possibly could, right? Because it's maintained a clear track record for many, many years at this point, even as other projects have been dealt with, like dealing with issues. It's just not really something that has been happening to Sky in the same way. And that's, of course, that really matters a lot. But then on top of that, there's also this whole, just the transparency and like the effort that goes into actually explaining the risk, understanding the risk, right? Because it's not just like through luck that Sky didn't have security incidents, right? Or risk events. It's because it's like very carefully engineered, very carefully designed, and all of the thinking that goes into that design is made as public and open and transparent as possible, because this is essential for the sophisticated users, right? Institutions and crypto whales that use Sky and hold their assets in SUSDS. They really need to be able to do their due diligence and actually access public information in things like our risk dashboards or our governance rule sets, so they can sort of directly actually look at it, look at how the sausage is made on their own, rather than listening to some salesman telling them it's all good, right? That's just going to be continuously improved over time. And what's interesting is, like, it sounds like, well, we're just, Sky's just focusing more and more on security, managing risk better and better. Like, it sounds really boring, right? Like, it's just like a bunch of going in circles and making everything more safe and more secure. But the thing about, in particular, decentralized systems in DeFi, right? And I guess maybe you can think more broadly, decentralized systems. There's this really interesting characteristic that security and risk management is what enables scale. So without, so basically, like, when we think about, like, when I'm thinking about, like, how we're gonna grow Sky to get really huge and massive and like a huge business and make tons of money and tons of profits and so on, like, the key to that is through security and risk management. And that's because if you do tons of security, like if you have extremely solid, extremely scalable security and risk management processes, you can open up for more complexity. So actually, like in theory, Sky could like do 10 times what it's doing right now. Like the protocol absolutely has the capacity to onboard like 10 times as much collateral and, like go into like do this sort of very diversify like into all sorts of high risk or not necessarily high risk, but like all these like exotic, super innovative things out there. But the problem is, like at that point, it gets impossible to track end to end what's happening everywhere all at once, right? And that's the key to this. Like you shouldn't be you shouldn't be scaling so fast you can't track and explain exactly what's going on in every single corner. And this is really like, I mean, with Sky, the kind of the model that Sky is going with for scaling is modularity, right? So you have multiple Sky agents, right? You have Spark focusing a lot of DeFi, you have Growth focusing a lot on RWA, right? You have OPEX, Keel, like other agents that are all focusing on different areas. And they all have their own autonomy to go and do things, right? So with that approach, you could really just like open the floodgates and let's be like, yeah, go do whatever you want. And they would dig up, 1,000 opportunities within a very short amount of time. But that's exactly the opposite of what we want, right? It has to be that everything they do, it must be sort of possible to essentially like, I guess you could say mathematically prove that this is within the risk tolerances, this is within the existing approved risk categories, it's following the capital ratios, it's like following best practice. And ultimately, I mean, the goal is really to be able to at all times prove that Sky is following best practice that is equivalent to or better than what you see in modern banking, right? So all the risk management frameworks are sort of fundamentally based on and kind of building on top of the Basel banking risk management framework.
Yeah. Rune, one of your points was particularly interesting about kind of managing all of the, disparate risk parameters that are present in a given DeFi protocol. One of the things that Rob Haddock said yesterday on the show is that this is just another clear example that the design of pooled lending is really likely going to slowly kind of consolidate into much more of this isolated model as the Fidelities and the Revoluts and these larger firms come on chain. Do you agree that the future of on-chain lending is very isolated? It's very single collateral asset, single debt asset, very clear as far as what you're getting into from that perspective? Like, I'm just curious, like what you think about how on-chain lending is going to evolve, because I think Spark, maybe is not exactly in this direction. Morpho probably closer, but maybe that's not the right take. Like, just generally curious, is this another example of, hey, on-chain lending is moving towards isolated, curated risk design rather than the pooled model? How do you think about this transition?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's an interesting topic, and it's kind of frying my brain a little bit in the sense that when you talk about finance, it's like often you use a lot of different words for more or less like one or two or three, maybe like basic concepts, right? So I guess the question is, do you consider like stablecoin? Do you think like of banking, of deposits? Do you think of that as lending your money? Like when you put your money in the bank, is that lending to the bank? And depending on how you sort of want to answer that semantic question, right? Then, I mean, if you basically define lending as, I'm like, I have something I consider my sort of my currency, my risk-free asset, and then I'm going out and I'm deliberately taking some additional risk with it, then I think it's absolutely true. Like in that case, and whenever you're sort of thinking and you're like, I'm going to go and take some risk, like nobody should ever be like, oh, I'm going to take some risk. I don't know what the hell I'm doing, but let's take some risk, right? Like that's a horrible way to do stuff, right? But what's interesting is as a type of, financial activity, which is essentially like savings or stable coins, right? So stability, that's specifically the type of product that is designed to be here. You don't have to think super carefully, right? And really like analyze everything end to end. I mean, you should be able to if you want to, right? This is everything we strive for in Sky, right? But the point with Sky is exactly that. It's this massive diversified pool. Everybody goes in the same. Well, it's okay. Let me take it back. It's not a pool. It's a token, right? Everybody goes in the same token, and the token then like deploys through the, through the Sky agents, through the core vaults, all the RWAs, right, that are backed by large regulated, the large global institutions, and like this massive diversified portfolio, and ultimately, I think the point is really that that's a massive responsibility, right? Like if you ultimately regulate such a large portfolio, which is what Sky does, it's just, it's like a very serious, very significant task to at all times monitor that, right? Measure the risk left and right. And it's, once you get big enough, also you get this issue that it's no longer all about, actually, this is the recent incident is a perfect case of it, right? That one thing is insolvency, literally losing money and whoops, the money is gone type of stuff. But increasingly, as you get bigger and as it gets more sort of liquidity focused and currency this issue of just purely liquidity and fear and I want my money and I want to feel safe and so on, that itself becomes a huge risk vector, which is something that gets more and more complicated the more you dive into it. But from my perspective, if you think of if you say lending and you define that as risk, sort of risky, very deliberate lending, then yes, that's absolutely going in individual collateral direction. If you think of DeFi as a whole and sort of this concept of holding your assets in DeFi and getting a good return on your assets in DeFi, it can't really be done. It has to be diversified. It has to be this large scale managed governed stuff. And I think what will happen is it will consolidate. This has always been the case, right? That there's been a few very large players in DeFi. I also think that actually, it will be a lot easier actually for the large players to distinguish themselves and kind of benefit from focusing on security and risk management. I really do feel like that is the market has been changing a lot, and that sentiment has been a lot in the forefront. Actually, the big moment was exactly in the fall, around 1010. Actually, was that's commonly known as that's the moment when the vibe really, really changed, and suddenly, as a project, you had to really, not only did you have to focus on security, that's one thing, and sort of focus on being this is how I'm keeping everything safe, this is how I'm keeping it stable. But what's so amazing actually from that is that it started giving you an advantage. It started, the market finally gave you positive feedback when you did the right thing, which was care about security, care about stability. And I feel it's been sort of a frustrating thing for Sky because it's the project that has always been so massively obsessed with security and stability and safety. But sort of crypto cycle after crypto cycle, we're sort of getting clowned on every time there's a bull market. Then everyone is oh, they're so boring and lame, right? And then everything crashes, and suddenly people want to talk to us again. But I think finally we're past that now, and there is this fundamental understanding that the low risk stuff, the risk adjusted returns, that's actually when that is when there's a massive opportunity. And to my earlier point, right, that's how you get massive scale, right? That's how you get economies of scale. That's going to give you profits, right? That's going to give you the stuff that the market is now looking for. So I really think, I don't think DeFi is over at all from this. I think it's going to evolve. It's going to get way stronger and way better. And overall, it's a terrible situation, and I hope it gets resolved really soon, right? But I also really hope that the whole industry and everyone who sort of survives and comes out on the other end, right, and are able to reconstitute themselves, right, that they really seize this opportunity to have stability, safety, security be the cornerstone of their growth and their business case.
I agree. I think DeFi is going to be fine. I appreciate the thorough answer on the lending model side of things. It's going to be rapidly evolving. The entire space. Arbitrum freezing those funds was a big win, and I think the situation hopefully is resolved sooner sooner than later, Rune. So appreciate you spending some time with us today, man. Looking forward to seeing Sky hit that 20 billion mark this year. Best of luck, man.
Thanks a lot. Glad to be here.
Thanks, Rune. Alrighty, guys, that's Stabled Up, episode number 28. We're gonna take a super quick break, get Philip, the CSO of Coinbase, into the show. Our last guest of the day. We'll be right back.
Money, power, and money, power, and we get deep, you know we get deep. You know we get deep, we get deep, you know we get deep. We get deep, we get deep, we get deep, you know we get deep.
Alrighty, guys, we are back with Philip Martin, the Chief Security Officer at Coinbase. Notably been in conversation with Anthropic about Mythos, apparently, as of late, a U.S. Army veteran, a smoked meat enjoyer. Phil, how are you, man?
Doing well. How are you?
Doing well as well. What a crazy couple of days for DeFi.
It's been absolutely wild. Absolutely wild. And I think, the reality is we're going to see more of this going forward. I think it's a very interesting overlap of some of the new frontier AI models and their ability to be really impressively good at cybersecurity. And the fact of the matter that for DeFi, we're really running code in the open, right? Makes it much more susceptible to that kind of attack than just trying to point a model at an API endpoint.
Yeah. So I had Dragonfly GP on yesterday, Rob Haddock, and he said a lot of people misrepresent the amount of AI involved in these exploits. He said it's basically a lot of just internal infrastructure malpractice from a security perspective. Do you agree with that?
Broadly, yes. I think we will see the amount of AI involved in these things increase. In my view, increase pretty substantially as time goes on.
And do you think that the prevalence of exploits that are AI related are more possible on chain, or this more of this kind of like traditional security, DNS, domain hijacking, phishing? How do you think about the surface area for these types of things in terms of the different attack vectors?
Yeah. So for AI specifically, right? Context management is really important, right? The ability for you to provide that model with as much information, or at least as much relevant information as you can, is going to help it do a lot better, right? So that's why, in general, I believe AI actually favors the defender over the attacker. I think that's turned a little bit on its head for things like smart contracts, right? Where the context is actually pretty evenly shared between the attacker and the defender because it's all on chain, right? And it allows a defender or an attacker to move very, very quickly, much more so than in traditional sort of the assumptions we might make traditionally, right? And so I think that'll be uniquely harmful for DeFi protocols. I think we will see the pace of cyber attacks increase generally, right? Because AI enables both bad guys and good guys, right, to do more and do it faster. And so being able to, maybe the initial entry vector, right, is some sort of infrastructure thing, but then being able to leverage AI agents to move laterally, move internally, it's going to make the pace of an incident a lot faster than it is today.
Interesting. You put out, or you contributed to a report around quantum as of late. It was a very well done piece, and wanted to talk more about that. I mean, we've had quite a few different conversations. One of the maybe overly optimistic takes that I've been sharing that is probably even, one could say silly, is that Q-Day is not actually coming. I mean, that this day is just not coming. Why am I so absurdly wrong on that?
You know what? You're not necessarily. This is a really interesting area where very smart, well-informed people at the forefront of this field have wildly divergent opinions on when, and in some cases, even if Q-Day is coming. Now, I think we can look at and sort of extrapolate from the pace of research and from some of the breakthroughs that we're seeing. And I think it's becoming harder and harder to say that Q-Day is never coming. Yeah. Even some of the most sort of dedicated advocates are having a harder and harder time justifying their position. But the reality is, right, we're still doing basic research. This is not an engineering problem. This is not we know the answer, we just have to scale it, right? We're still doing fundamental research into how quantum computers operate at scale. And there is no clear technique or winner that's going to take us from here to a cryptographically relevant quantum computer, right? So I think there is still room for doubt. My overall position on this, however, is it doesn't actually matter. The timeline doesn't matter. The if question doesn't actually matter, because the risk here is actually a trust risk for cryptocurrencies, right? And so doing nothing at all having no plan for a post-quantum future. Maybe Q-Day comes, maybe it doesn't, but that's causing harm right now to the trust in the ecosystem.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, it's been a big headwind for the Bitcoin. I think for Bitcoin institutional adoption as of late, I think this is a question that is it's a very easy question to ask from an allocator perspective. Like, oh, well, how are you going to solve this, right? Because a lot of these guys think, far longer term than perhaps the average current, user or speculator in the market. And it's a very easy, 2035 is around the corner. What happens then, right? And that's something that they want to avoid. Now, one of the things that I haven't particularly heard or been educated too much about on has been around why post-quantum computing and cryptography needs to be at both the execution layer and the consensus layer of blockchains. This was part of this report. Maybe you could just help us unpack what that means. We're pretty technical here, but not understanding exactly why you need it on the consensus side and on the execution side.
Yeah. So the execution side, I think, is fairly obvious. You guys have had a couple of guests on, right? I think got Alex Pruden on relatively recently, who is, I think, incredibly smart and thoughtful about this space. But that's straightforward, right? You use private keys to sign your transactions to the extent that the corresponding public key is made public in that transaction. That's what gives the quantum computer something to bite into, right? And lets it, in theory, assuming big enough and performant enough, factor that public key so that we can get back to the private key so they can sign messages. I think what we also need to pay attention to, however, and it's actually not just the consensus. We have to pay attention to the entire ecosystem and infrastructure. We were talking earlier about hey, are these really AI assisted hacks, or are they just basic infrastructure stuff, right? A quantum computer that can break public key cryptography and weaken, although not entirely break, hash-based systems, isn't just about doing a spin-related transaction. It's also about the entire infrastructure layer, right? So suddenly now I can inject messages in an SSL secured communications path between two systems, right? I can start to spoof information in there. I can start to do things we just saw with the recent DAO hack, right? That was an RPC issue, right? So imagine if I could get in the middle of a communication like that and start to tamper with it without having to break into the endpoints on either side, right? So there's a bunch of surface area that's exposed from a quantum computer here. That's more than just my private key for crypto is going to get broken.
So the idea is that in the kind of gossiping of data amongst nodes, that there could be a interference from a quantum computer, not just necessarily on the transaction signing or the execution of that transaction.
There's and not just that, right? There's a ton of surface area. If you can say, hey, I can now with a performant enough quantum computer, I can real time, right, break SSL. Yeah, that opens up a lot of surface area for mischief.
Okay. Do you think that there is any credence to these current quantum resistant chains? It seems to me that nothing's quantum resistant on chain today, but for some reason, this Google paper came out and it listed Algorand, a couple other chains and projects. Even Justin Sun came out and said, Tron's got these NIST signatures coming on chain and it's happening. How much credence do you give to the idea of these NIST signatures being adopted today? Also, something like Starkware has came out that their Starks, this is their notable improvement to the ZK technology of Snarks, is quantum resistant. They don't use elliptic curve cryptography. just how much credence do you give to the current state of, we have post quantum in our, XYZ stack?
Yeah, so I don't think any major cryptocurrency today has anything more than a test net stood up that is quantum resistant. That last time I checked, that may have changed, right? But I don't believe there's anything more than a test net. Also, so the NIST standard you're talking about, in particular, the one I think will be implemented by most blockchains because it's called Falcon, is really one of the more efficient signature schemes for post-quantum, but it's still something like 10 times larger from a signature perspective than a traditional ECC signature, which is very, very compact. That is going to cause throughput issues on blockchains as this stuff is adopted. And all the other signatures are even worse from a size perspective, right? Which is why I think Falcon will probably be the winner for most blockchains, because it's the least bad of the current known implementations. And so there's actually quite a bit of, I think, engineering left to do to figure out what this is going to look like on chain and what the impacts to throughput are going to be, and how we want to think about the issue of these algorithms are actually quite new, right? We look at all the various sort of NIST, sort of blessed algorithms. We don't necessarily know that that there isn't a classical computing vulnerability in these algorithms, right? Cryptography is one of those unique spaces where smart people who spend careers in the space make mistakes quite frequently because it is so complicated, both from a theory perspective and from an implementation perspective, right? And so I worry that rushing to bring this sort of quantum resistant algorithm to chain is actually premature right now because we don't yet fully understand the threat model or the potential vulnerability space for these algorithms.
Yeah. Man, kind of shifting into something that's relevant in terms of the rushing and the timing, but not, necessarily quantum here. I did see some news that Coinbase was, speaking with Anthropic about potential Mythos, AGI, hacking, and these things. Are you worried about Claude Mythos as a serious attack vector for a large-scale financial services company like Coinbase?
I'm worried about these sort of bleeding edge models in not necessarily today, because I think they're very tightly controlled. What I'm worried about is a year, 2 years down the line when we start to get the efficiency of these things up and we start to get sort of open weight models that have, sort of on par performance. Today, these are enormous models. Right, very impractical to run outside of an organization like Anthropic or OpenAI or any of the big AI labs. But we're going to see improvements both in efficiency as well as, but really across the board. Right, efficiency. We're going to see better sort of model streaming. We've already seen some interesting research around sort of running models. Not fully in memory, but from Flash, right? So the efficiency picture is going to get better, and these models are going to be able to be run, without having to spend $10 million in hardware. Maybe you're only spending $100,000 in hardware, right? And for an attacker group, that's going to be very, very tempting, right? And so I'm like today, I don't think Mythos is going to take over the world as it escapes a sandbox and breaks everything, right? That's not a real fear. But in a couple of years, I could see being in a much more worrying state, which is why I think it's so good that Anthropic and others are being very careful with how this model is being released. They want to make sure that defenders have enough of a head start to patch things. And we've seen some of the bugs it's found, right? It found a 27-year-old bug in OpenBSD, right? One of the most audited code bases in the entire world. It's like very, very impressive stuff.
Yeah. So on the defenders front, you made an interesting point earlier about that. Wouldn't it just be sufficient for the defenders to get, as you say, a bit of a head start using something like this and then providing that as a ample, defense to the potential bad actors, or is it just not that simple?
I don't think it's going to be that simple, because you're never going to find all the bugs the first time, right? When you use an AI model like this as a defender, you're running these things hundreds, thousands of times across your various pieces of code and services and infrastructure, and you get new and different results as you run it again, as you tweak its approach. So it's not a simple like, oh, I ran it and I found all the bad things and everything's good and wonderful now, right? And so it's always going to be a bit of an arms race, I think, as both the models improve, as the ways of using them improve. So it's not going to be as simple as just, oh, the good guys get it before the bad guys, because the bad guys will get it eventually, and they're going to run it in new and different ways that maybe the defenders didn't think about. Yeah.
And so from a large scale company like Coinbase, what does the preparation process look like? Like what is the security hardening for the team, for the, anything from a password to a security key, to a signer, to a email account, to a browser, to a webcam call? Like what is the scope and length of security hardening processes look like, to prepare for this advanced intelligence?
So we already use AI extensively internally in how we do, application security and security hardening and really in every piece of how we do security today. And so when we think about, a new model like Mythos or, OpenAI's 5.4 Cyber or whatever else comes next, it's really about learning the nuances of how those models need to be prompted, how they manage context, like how we need to tweak our approach as we swap a new model in. This is even true of moving from Claude 4.6 to 4.7.
Yeah.
Right? Is the big difference is, what do we need to do to give this model the instructions and the context and the way that it sort of best consumes it?
Yeah.
And then it's about making sure that we have the right sandboxes in place, right? So as we do, let's say, AI-assisted pen testing or red teaming, we're always very, very careful and think very, very hard about the environment we're doing that in. Not because, AI is going to escape and do something crazy, but because, hey, in the process, AI might choose to exploit a vulnerability to do a POC, right? Which is fine and normal and part of any good pen testing process. But AI doesn't necessarily realize that, that exploit is going to result in deleting data, for example, or that exploit is going to result in or a DDoS of some sort, right? And so we want to think long and hard about the environments we're setting up so that the models get as close as possible to a live instance without the potential for that model going a little bit off the rails and doing something it shouldn't do.
Yep. Phil, man, I know you're probably slammed right now. It's been a busy week in DeFi. There's a lot of people running around trying to make what's happened right. And then in addition to that, obviously the ever increasing amount of intelligence, happening. I think this way to think about this from the defender and attacker perspective is quite interesting. And I think that, you'll think that this model is going to be the one that you have to solve. And then a year or two later, it's going to be a whole nother level of a model that you have to solve and that you have to, prepare for. The internet is in for a very interesting, decade or so as we scale this intelligence.
I fully believe that to be true. And I think you're exactly right? So my 10-year anniversary at Coinbase was last week.
Congrats, man.
Thanks. And I have never seen an industry evolve so quickly and take so many left turns that you didn't see coming a year prior than this one, right? So it's always a fun place to be.
Well, Phil, thanks for joining us, man. Have a great rest of your week and day. Congrats on the 10 years and appreciate you keeping us safe, man.
Yeah, anytime.
All right, buddy. We'll see you soon, all right?
Bye.
All right, Phil. All righty, guys. That is the Claude Mythos, future of how these industries are going to protect themselves, how crypto is going to protect itself. That is also our show for today, guys. It is Tuesday, April 21st, and iBattle Rhino is getting suspicious about the coins. Oh, goodness. Oh, goodness. Ladies and gentlemen, we will see you guys tomorrow, bright and early here from the Nest. Stay safe out there. Stay sound. I hope DeFi figures all of these little nooks and crannies out sooner than later. Tomorrow, we'll hop off the security exploit conversation. I think these last 2 days have been they've been sombering, they've been real, and they've been very important to have a discussion about. I think after these types of events, the industry takes this stuff very seriously for, 4, 6, 8 weeks, and then we kind of continue on. I hope this time, this event, things are taken very seriously. We'll see you guys here tomorrow, Wednesday, April 22nd, from the Nest, from the Tokenization Tower. Thanks for rocking with us.